Două interviuri pe care le-am realizat în Statele Unite cu doi investigatori de acolo care în anchetele lor private, ca să se înțeleagă, au ajuns, luând urma unor multe zeci de milioane, au ajuns în România, găsind interesele și rețeaua unuia dintre cei mai bogați miliardari ai planetei. Haideți să vedem.
He's using, as you suggest, hundreds and hundreds of non-governmental organizations in places like Romania and Hungary and Colombia and Guatemala and Poland, Macedonia, Albania.
When George Soros comes into Romania or Macedonia, there isn't anything remotely like him.
Bill Gates, George Soros, Jeff Bezos, familia Rockefeller și, în general, toți miliardarii mega influenți pe care îi vedem mereu reuniți la Davos sunt în centrul unei controverse care ia amploare pe plan internațional, că sunt artizanii unei resetări mondiale, sintetizată mai ales în cartea lui Klaus Schwab, Revoluția a patra industrială, controversă care a luat amploare mai ales odată cu pandemia. Denumiți generic neomarxiști, principiile promovate le-ați auzit de multe ori și în România, în special venind de la unii lideri USR. De exemplu, o lume fără proprietate, în care trăim mai mulți în comun, ne reducem consumurile energetice pentru a salva planeta, la fel și pe cel de carne, în special cea de vită, sau din agricultură, fiindcă sunt cauze ale încălzirii globale. În România, acuzațiile au apărut mai de mult, în special legate de interesele unui magnat anume, George Soros, și a rețelei de ONG-uri finanțate pe diverse filiere și implicate în mai multe evenimente cheie din 2012 încoace. Protestele pentru Roșia Montană, cele de după tragedia de la Colectiv, care au dus la picarea guvernului Ponta, cele Rezist din februarie 2017 sau protestul violent din 10 august 2018. S-a contracarat mereu că nu sunt decât aberații și teorii conspiraționiste. Două ONG-uri de investigații din Statele Unite însă spun că nu sunt deloc povești, că au dovezi concrete, documente ale intereselor miliardarului George Soros în România, iar noi am mers la Washington să stăm de vorbă cu reprezentanții acestora.
În clădirea din spatele meu se află o organizație mică, în schimb foarte determinată să afle care sunt influențele și oamenii care acționează pentru George Soros, atât în interiorul Departamentului de Stat al Statelor Unite, dar atenție și în România. Au găsit documente legate de România, documente oficiale.
The Soros organization is massive. It's a complex of organizations. What we call sort of the mothership, though, is the Open Society Foundation. This is the main non-profit vehicle that George Soros uses, that he has poured literally billions and billions of dollars into, to, I would argue, effectively destroy Western civilization to the best of his ability around the world. He is working, he is using, as you suggest, hundreds and hundreds of non-governmental organizations in places like Romania and Hungary and Colombia and Guatemala and Poland, Macedonia, Albania, all countries that we are looking now at him, at his operations, and we are stunned by the level of cooperation between the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, with the Soros organization. It's an insidious, really evil mechanism, and it's very sophisticated. It's very complex, as you alluded to. It's a web of hundreds, maybe thousands of organizations around the world. It's a means by which George Soros has largely co-opted American foreign policy at the very most basic grassroots level in many of these countries. This notion that a very wealthy, extraordinarily wealthy individual is promoting radical leftist agendas that are fundamentally anti-American, anti-conservative, if you will, in all of these countries around the world is very, very concerning. It should be concerning. They're heavily involved in promoting the legalization of marijuana, LGBT issues, same-sex marriage, breaking down borders, promoting the invasion or the influx of foreigners across national borders. Because ultimately George Soros is like a transnationalist. like Hillary and like Barack Obama and these other people, they don't believe in national borders. It would be an abdication of his responsibility if he did not enforce our borders. That's all that he's trying to do. And people like George Soros don't want to see that.
Why?
Because I think they're fundamentally anti-Western civilization. He's wreaking havoc. George Soros is wreaking havoc in many of these countries. The level of corruption is growing. And it's a very sad commentary on the state of our education system and the knowledge or lack of knowledge of young people and what they're being taught at the university and even at in the high school and grammar school levels. They're not learning, and always seems to be this antagonistic force, this large element of society that wants to collectivize, that wants to crush the individual, wants to, just impose force, impose their vision of the world through force. So you have these two competing philosophies. It's just these two opposing forces, and it's a constant struggle to remind people of what America was founded on. This idea that every individual has God-given rights, and that the individual has primacy over the government. Our culture is all about the sovereignty of the individual and the unique, God-given rights that every individual has, and the left is always trying to crush that. So we're in a constant battle here. And I think it's true all over the world. There's the same dynamic is at work, these two opposing forces. So and I think George Soros is at the pinnacle of that effort to crush the individual.
În această clădire din spatele meu se află un think tank american de investigații numit Capital Research Center. Acest think tank a publicat o serie de articole numită Fantomele lui Soros în România și este vorba despre 9 articole. Așadar, oamenii aceștia spun că România este foarte, foarte interesantă pentru unul dintre cei mai importanți și puternici miliardari ai planetei. Înăuntru ne așteaptă președintele acestei organizații, un om care a lucrat în dreapta unui președinte american și care știe foarte multe despre George Soros, despre cum acționează ONG-urile și cum ajung ele în politică, dar și despre cum funcționează statul paralel.
The Capital Research Center exists to study the abuses of those powers. It especially gets abusive when the civil society groups try to directly influence governmental things. And I'm afraid that happens in America in our own politics here in the United States, but also because our charities and foundations are so huge and wealthy, they even do it, or some of them, I should say, do it in other countries. And of course, Mr. Soros is easily the most notorious because he is probably more involved than any other American philanthropist, donor in other countries' politics. Let me give you my favorite George Soros quotation about this, right? He's challenged, well, aren't you meddling in other countries' politics? Isn't that, their internal affairs, that you shouldn't? And he said, of course, what I do could be called meddling because I want to promote an open society. Now, that's good so far. That's good. Then he adds, an open society transcends national sovereignty. Wait a minute. That's not let's all have our debates and be equal in that debate and let the people choose. That is, if you think that Romania should govern itself and that being a Romanian is different from being a Bulgarian or a Pole or an Englishman, then you're disallowed. You can't be in this debate. It's not open to you because you have the wrong kind of ideas. Now, when
You're narrow-minded.
Yes, he put about $6 million in the European parliamentary elections. How many other people were putting in $6 million, right? Not a lot. When George Soros comes into Romania or Macedonia, there isn't anything remotely like him. So it's really scary for a Romania, a Macedonia, a Hungary. There is just nothing like that.
So you said we should be scared if he's interested in us.
Well, I think so. It is a shocking thing for this billionaire to be landing in Romania in the very first private plane that gets to land after the communist dictator falls. Now, I suppose part of it would be that he is a Hungarian by birth, so at least that part of the world is probably, a bigger passion for him than the average American who's born, an ocean away. But at the same time, it's one thing to want to bring down a tyrant, right? I mean, it was a nice thing if Soros was helping resistance groups who were fighting communist tyrants. But you would think that then it would be, okay, well, the tyrants have come down, so that's great. These countries can now get to govern themselves. You wouldn't think that somebody would say, oh, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to, again, help you, except I'm going to help you go in exactly the direction that I think you should go, because I've already told you that, I'm really very smart and wise, and really if everyone just listened to me, things would be so much better. I can tell you, later this year we're going to have a very big report on Soros's enterprises in this, which Romania will be included.
Oh.
And because lots of the European nations and the USAID
I want
stuff.
to know
Yes.
when that happens.
Well, there was the what we're doing is we're digging through the massive records, internal Soros Foundation records, that the DC Leaks people that nobody knows who it was, might have been Russian intelligence. That's the best guess because it always is. Who knows?
Sincerely, I don't care.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
They're real.
Exactly, they're real. Soros's people have never denied the authenticity of any of them.
Yes.
And there's a huge record there, and we're going through them. And what you see when these are not what they, U.S. law requires you to report a little bit about your grant making if you're a foundation. So it will say Open Society Foundation in New York City gave money to this Romanian NGO, or gave $100,000. But that's about all it will say. In their internal documents, you see much more clearly what they're up to. And what you see is, in country after country, certainly including Romania, we're giving money to this youth group so they'll turn out young voters. We're giving money to this gay and lesbian group so they'll turn out their voters. We're giving money over and over. They're picking very carefully the groups that they want to mobilize to register to vote and go vote. So it's a very direct political intention, even though it is hidden through we're helping young people. Yes, we're helping young people who will register to vote and then vote for the candidate that we like.
Yes, that might even sound, I'm going to play the devil advocate with this. That might sound like, oh, so what's wrong? He gave us money, he helped us, so why don't we just think like him and help him out too? What's wrong about that?
Well, if he had Romania's best interests at heart, that wouldn't be unreasonable. But as we heard from before, you have to transcend your national sovereignty, which is to say, Romania doesn't really matter. In fact, there's something wrong with you if you think that Romania means something and matters. And 100 years from now, there should be a Romania, right? So if you think that's all bad. I don't want that. And so that would be my answer. If anyone who loves his country ought to distrust somebody who doesn't like the very idea of countries.
Și aș vrea din nou să fac o precizare. Acești doi oameni reprezintă două instituții, adică și Bill Marshall de la Head Researcher pe Soros Funding, de la Judicial Watch, vorbește pe documente oficiale obținute în urma unor procese, pe FOIA. FOIA este documentul de acces la informații clasificate din Statele Unite, documente obținute de la Departamentul de Stat. Scott Walter de la Capital Research Center, care a fost consilier personal al președintelui George W. Bush, vorbește pe documente interne ale Fundației Soros, care toate au fost publicate, nu au fost negate, există punctele de vedere. Deci, din această perspectivă vorbesc acești oameni și fac aprecierile pe care le-ați văzut.